Hello, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to our YouTube channel. Today we will be talking about spouse visa applications. The purpose of these videos is to help provide you with some general information and guidance in understanding your cases better, and therefore to better prepare those cases to give you the best prospects of success. Just a reminder as ever that these videos are for general information and are no substitute for actual legal advice. So if you require specific legal advice, then please contact one of our experts who can assist you. I'm going to focus on spouse applications for partners applying from overseas to join their British partners in the UK. The main requirements that you need to satisfy are that you have either contracted a valid marriage, or that you have lived together as husband and wife for at least 2 years, that you intend to live together permanently as husband and wife, and that you meet the financial requirements, that you have adequate accommodation, that you meet the language requirements, and for some countries there's a requirement to do a TB test. In addition, there are some general grounds that you need to satisfy, and they're referred to as suitability grounds. So going through each of those requirements, and I'll start off with the suitability requirements. In terms of the suitability requirements, the first things that are looked at is whether anyone has any criminal convictions, however minor they are. But ordinarily, if you don't have a serious criminal conviction, and certainly not a very recent criminal conviction, then that should not affect your application. The other things that are looked at is whether you owe any debts to the Home Office, the NHS, or any other government body. So if someone has been to the UK previously and has been involved in court proceedings, and especially judicial review proceedings where court orders are made for costs, then you need to ensure that those costs have been fully paid before making an application. Otherwise, there is the risk of falling foul of the suitability requirements. In relation to the relationship aspect, you either need to prove that you have contracted a valid marriage, or that you have been living together as husband and wife for at least 2 years. In order to prove marriage, obviously you will need to produce your marriage certificate. And where one of the parties or both parties have been married previously, then you need clear evidence to show the marriage, the earlier marriages have properly been dissolved. Where you have an unmarried relationship, then you need clear evidence to prove that you've lived together for at least 2 years. And that ordinarily is proved by way of correspondence, letters, bills, bank statements, any form of correspondence with names and addresses on, to show that you've lived together at the same address for a period of at least 2 years. I should just mention that in relation to fiancés, and they're defined as partners within the immigration rules as well, and the additional requirement in those circumstances is to show that you actually intend to get married within 6 months of your arrival in the UK. And often, if it's possible, then the UK partner should be asked to make contact with the Register Office and get confirmation of a provisional booking for a marriage registration in the UK, and evidence of that to be provided in support of the application. In relation to the income threshold, the minimum income threshold is £18,600, but where there are children of the family, then additional increments are applied. For the first child, an addition of £3,800 is required, taking the income threshold to £22,400. For the second child, an additional increment of £2,400 is applied. So therefore, if you have 2 children of the family who are also applying to join, then the threshold goes up to £24,800. And if there are additional children, then £2,400 per child is applied. Now, in terms of meeting the income requirements, the first requirement is that the UK sponsor has held their job for at least 6 months. Where they haven't held their job for at least 6 months, then it's possible to aggregate income over a 12-month period adding in income from previous jobs as well. I should just make clear that it's not necessary to meet the income threshold by holding just one job. You can combine that with another job or more than one job. That's not an issue. In terms of the documentary evidence that you would need to provide, where the UK sponsor is employed, you'd need to provide a letter from the employer to confirm the job title, how long the job has been held for, whether the job's permanent or not, and what the income the sponsor is earning. You also need to provide 6 months pay slips, 6 months bank statements to show the money passing through the account. It's not enough that you are receiving income in cash. Where the sponsor is self-employed, then the documentary evidence that needs to be provided is obviously very different. You need to provide the latest tax return, the financial accounts in terms of the profit and loss account, bank statements covering a 12-month period, which correlates with the period of the tax return, a letter from the accountant confirming the earnings and the self-employment, the SA 302 from HMRC as known as the tax calculation, and you also need to provide evidence to show that the necessary tax and national insurance contributions have been paid. Where the sponsor runs their own limited company, then the documentary evidence that needs to be provided is quite substantial, and I would suggest that you contact our office to request a list of documents. You should also bear in mind that where the sponsor is employed by a close relative who runs a limited company, then those same evidential requirements apply for limited companies. And you should get careful advice, because often people struggle with the level of documentation that is required for those type of applications. In terms of meeting the accommodation requirements, that's pretty straightforward. If you're in rented accommodation, you would produce your tenancy agreement together with a property inspection report, which you can get from an estate agent or surveyor, to confirm that no overcrowding is going to be caused with the addition of your partner and or children that will join you in the UK. If the sponsor's living with family members, then all they need to do is to provide a letter from the family member who's the owner of the property to confirm that you can join them at the property. They will also need to provide evidence of ownership of the property and copies of their passports to confirm their ID. In terms of meeting the language requirements, the test that needs to be done is an A1 level test. It's a very basic English language test, and you would need to sit that through IELTS or Trinity College, and you'll need to make inquiries in your home country where best to be able to sit those tests through an approved secure centre. There's a requirement to do a TB test for certain countries, and that primarily is for people from Southeast Asia and from the African continent, but you should make inquiries to see whether or not that is a particular requirement for the country that you are coming from. There are exemptions for nationals of those countries where they've lived in another country for a period of 6 months, and there is no particular requirement for a TB test to be done from that country. The test can only be done through an approved, accredited UKVI provider. If you just simply did a Google search and put in TB test UKVI, you will get a list of the countries from which tests are necessary, and it also gives you a list of the approved hospitals where you can get those tests done. Just going back to the financial requirements, some of you may have been affected by the COVID lockdown and as a result suffered a loss of income or a reduced income. There are some specific exemptions that are in place to protect people who have suffered this sort of loss of income as a result of the coronavirus, and you should get specific advice in relation to that to see whether or not you would be able to benefit from that sort of exemption. So far, what we've talked about is applications for partners from overseas, where both parties are already in the UK and you're either making the first application or extending a previous spouse visa. Then essentially the requirements are the same, except obviously in country you don't need to do things like the TB test. You do not need to provide a property inspection report. Instead, you simply provide your tenancy agreement or evidence of ownership of the property. And if you're living with family members, then evidence of ownership of their property, together with a letter confirming that you can continue to reside there. The more important requirement for extending in country is that you have a current visa to be in the UK, whether it's as a spouse or in another category except as a visitor. And generally, visitors are not entitled to switch into the spouse category, but there are particular circumstances in which it may be possible to do that. As I said, one of the most important requirements for in-country extensions is that you have a current visa to be in the UK. Where someone's visa is expired or they enter the UK illegally but have formed a relationship and then wish to make an application on that basis. As we were just talking, one of the most important requirements is that the applicant has a current visa to be in the UK. Where someone is an overstayer or enter the UK illegally, it may still be possible to get an extension, but in those circumstances, you need to prove that you meet one of the exceptional requirements. One of the exceptional requirements is that if you have a child who's a British citizen, or a child who's not a British citizen but has lived in the UK for at least 7 years, or alternatively, you can prove that there are what is defined as insurmountable obstacles to you continuing your family life overseas. And in essence, what that means is that you must be able to show that there are some serious difficulties and problems as to why you can't go and live together abroad. Where you're extending a spouse visa from within the UK and you've previously held a spouse visa, then the language threshold increases from A1 to A2. And when you get round to being eligible for indefinite leave, then you need to do a B1 language test as well as doing the Life in the UK test. You should be aware that when you're extending for the first time, if you do a higher level language test, then you can utilize that for future applications as well. If you require a list of documents that you need to provide with an entry clearance application or an in-country application, then you can either call the office on 0118 321 5340 or email us on info@legalrightspartnership.co.uk, or you could just go to our website and fill in the form and request a form, and we will send that through to you. Finally, thank you for watching and listening, and if you found this video helpful, then please like and share.